Chief Paul VandeGraaf, tragically, well, can you talk a little bit about the recent drug poisonings that have been taking place in the last few days?
Yeah, let's just move back a bit here. Like this year in 2021, we've seen a significant increase in these drug poisonings. We've had over 90 this year, which is double to 2 years ago, triple to last year. So obviously this health crisis is very concerning for all emergency service providers here in Cobourg and probably the county, if not the country, right? So, and unfortunately the last 7 days have seen two such tragedies in our municipality. And the impact of that is borne by obviously their families, and we can't express our condolences enough to the families of those two victims. But the whole community feels this, and we were commenting this morning at the morning briefing that the most recent event did put a damper on the organization. So this drug poisoning crisis that Canada is in, and Cobourg is part of that, has far-reaching impact for sure.
This will never, I don't think we'll ever get out of this. Drugs will never be removed from society completely. So what do we do?
Yeah, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think the war on drugs was Ronald Reagan's big rally cry, and that was back in the 80s. So let's just face reality that drugs are an element of our society. The opioid crisis is something that is a tragic health crisis. Unfortunately, the police are often thrust in the position of being the tip of the spear in response. So in other words, what I mean by that is our firefighters, our EMS providers, and our police officers are attending at tragic scenes such as we spoke of this last week, and they're left with the fallout and to assist the families who are grieving. We got to move way back though. At that point, there's nothing more we can do other than to provide life-saving care. This is, in that time, in that one moment, this is a health emergency, a critical health emergency. We got to move back a little bit. We got to move back and try to get it out of that response and start looking at the other pillars that include harm reduction, prevention, effective rehab. Like these are other things that just have to happen. And right now it's not there. The path to rehabilitation is too long. It's not at the right time. It's not immediate enough. That's why the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police at its most recent AGM this year put a call to the Ontario government and to create an Ontario task force on the opioid crisis. And we supported the Associated Municipalities of Ontario's requirement that the province identify a coordinator to look at resources that can intervene prior to police being involved. We'll always be there. There'll always be somebody in that tragic circumstance who's going to need the police with our life-saving skills and or the EMS, more than likely the EMS or fire. But we got to do a far better job. I cannot be looking at 90 drug poisonings again next year. And the only path to that is working with our community partners.
Anything with police enforcement that can be done, or is that sort of a hand in hand with it?
Again, this is not a policing issue. This is a health crisis. So when we look at health crisis, we need to look at a multifaceted partner approach to it. And I don't want to use big fancy words, but basically, we did a pilot project this year, one of the great projects that two of our officers came up with, and we ran the HARP program this summer for 2 months as a bit of a pilot, and we saw the officers acting as social navigators in the communities of need. What that did is it built trust, it created an opportunity for people to have off-the-record conversations, to create an opportunity for people to access resources that maybe they didn't know or were scared to access. We drove people to different communities where their families were or where there was a better support network. Not that we dumped our problem, we moved with people and we helped with people. That was so successful, that program, that we're currently in the process of submitting a provincial grant through the Community Safety Program grant for that position, those two positions to be permanent positions within the Cobourg Police Service. And that's what we can do as a police. But what we really need to do is come to the table with all of our partners and look at key harm reduction strategies to deal with drug poisonings.
Can you foresee it getting better? Like here's, us talking in that, and we know where the background has got us. But I mean, it's a long road to climb.
Yeah, I'm an eternal optimist. So I will never ever say to anybody, we can't do this. That's the signal of defeat. What we have to do is we have to look at this differently. We have to stop looking at the police as being the carrier of this. other than we are part of a team and we really need to focus on harm reduction. We need to move that. The municipality has begun to move that way most recently working with Parn and setting up needle drop-off boxes within the community. So that's the first step. The Community Safety Wellbeing Plan for Northumberland County is working towards that. Obviously, in our strategic plan that'll be launched next year, that's going to be right in the middle of it. So we are putting our best feet forward. We are creating opportunities. Our MHeart team, that's been really a great partnership between the Northumberland Hills Hospital and our police service, are out there. And they were there yesterday in this tragic circumstance. And they were on the ground assisting individuals. The police unfortunately get caught in the middle of having to serve two masters. There is a criminal element to drugs and the illicit trafficking of drugs. And that's where our people have focused their attention. We have never, in my tenure as chief or as deputy chief here in the town of Cobourg, arrested somebody for using drugs in one of these health crises. Never. And we will not. We will actively enforce, investigate, and arrest those responsible for bringing drugs into our community. And that's an important piece to make. We own our social navigation responsibility as part of a community, but we also own our specific team, which is the enforcement of those people who are preying on individuals through the unsafe use of this type of fentanyl or Karen fentanyl, and that's what we're talking about.
Over the course, well, if you can, and as I say, it shocked me to find out how small a dose can kill, or a hit or whatever it's called. But I mean, it's just amazing the small quantity, which I would assume would make it all the more harder for police to investigate, because it's not like years and years ago when when marijuana was illegal and there was a lot of it in a car. It's pretty easily to detect. Nowadays, such a small quantity.
Sure. So let's go way back. Like when we talk about in the early days, heroin generally was safe, but every once in a while there would be what they called a bad dose, and we'd have overdoses. We're now in a world with fentanyl, and I would refer everyone to look at Megan Sheffield's article in the Watershed, and she really breaks down, or Missy McLean, they really break down really nicely what is fentanyl. And really what this is a very potent drug used in very serious medical conditions, and they're patches, or they're a mixed dose. Well, what happens is when we start ripping up these patches, these fentanyl patches, you don't know what level of fentanyl is on each little section of this or how it's being distributed. So there's no surefire way. And that's why we have these drug poisonings, and that people are actually not anticipating an overdose. They're anticipating achieving some elements of peace, if you will, from whatever their addiction or whatever the trauma is they're dealing with. And instead what happens is they get a dose that the body just can't handle, and this is where we end up.
I was shocked when I saw a photo of the latest victim, and I'd like to ask you, what's a drug user look like? What's an addict look like, Paul?
You know what? When we tie in drug addiction to homelessness to poverty, I don't think it's important to talk about what the person looks like. This is a person in our society. This is a human being. So I just think it's more appropriate just to let the families be the families. And you know what? Drugs are tough on everybody.
What I was referring to is, like, there is no background to what, and that's what I was referring to. Like, not the demographics, but I mean, like, I'm just saying there's
fentanyl, like opioid crisis, knows no socioeconomic race divisions. They know people, they know human beings, this opioid crisis, and nobody is immune from being in a position where they're suffering a drug poisoning. Many of us have different resources and access to different things, and you have to look at our vulnerable population. And if you go back to our Psychology 101 days, they don't have the basic of Maslow's needs: secure shelter, secure food, secure clothing. With those insecurities, people are going to turn to, obviously, all sorts of inappropriate avenues to receive support. And that's where the community needs to come around and deal with insecure housing, insecure food, and insecure shelter. Get that kind of clothing, get all that stuff lined up. That's why the work of our officers, when we do Cram a Cruiser, it's not about the event, it's about what we're doing for people who are suffering an insecurity. So to those people who are suffering, we continue to support, and that's where policing needs to work with somebody else in the community and help them own this issue, not pass the buck, but get the people with the right skills doing the right work, and we as a police service can support them every day.